What happens when a beloved royal walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a warm conversation, only to be met with the most disrespectful interrogation of his life? It only took one comment about his late mother for the entire set to explode into absolute chaos. Prince Harry arrived at the Loose Women's studio that morning with nothing but good intentions. He was there to discuss his charity work, his dedication to mental health awareness, and his ongoing mission to help veterans struggling with trauma. The audience greeted him with thunderous applause as he walked across the stage, waving and smiling at the familiar faces of the panel. Ruth Langsford sat at one end, Nadia Sawalha in the middle, and Denise Welch commanded the center position with her usual confident posture. "Welcome, welcome," Denise said, her voice carrying that sharp edge she was known for. "Prince Harry, thank you for joining us today." Harry settled into his seat, adjusting his jacket. "Thanks for having me. It's great to be here." The first few minutes went smoothly enough. Ruth asked about his recent trip to Africa, and Harry lit up talking about the conservation projects he'd witnessed. Nadia chimed in with questions about the children he'd met at a hospital in Lesotho. The audience seemed engaged, on leaning forward in their seats as Harry described the resilience of young patients fighting serious illnesses. Then Denise leaned forward. "So, Harry," she began, her tone shifting slightly, "let's talk about something everyone's been wondering. You've spoken a lot about mental health, about your own struggles, but isn't it a bit rich, coming from someone who's had every privilege handed to him on a silver platter?" The audience went quiet. You could feel the temperature in the room drop several degrees. Ruth's eyes widened. She looked at Denise with an expression of disbelief. Nadia shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her hands gripping the edge of the desk. Harry blinked, processing the question. He took a breath before responding. "I'm sorry, what do you mean by that exactly?" "I mean," Denise continued, her voice growing louder and more pointed, "you're sitting here talking about struggle and hardship when you've lived in palaces your entire life. You've never had to worry about paying rent, keeping a job, putting food on the table. You've had nannies, private jets, the best education money can buy. How can you possibly relate to real people with real problems?" The audience murmured uncomfortably. A few people shifted in their seats. Ruth opened her mouth to say something, but Harry spoke first. Harry's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure remarkably well given the circumstances. "With respect, Denise, losing my mother at 12 years old, walking behind her coffin while millions of people watched around the world, dealing with that kind of grief in the public eye with cameras documenting every tear, every stumble, every moment of pain. Those aren't exactly privileges. Mental health issues don't discriminate based on your bank account or your address." "Oh, here we go," Denise said, rolling her eyes dramatically and throwing her hands up. Playing the mother card again, I wondered how long it would take. The gasp from the audience was audible. Ruth immediately interjected. "Denise, that's completely out of line." "Is it, though?" Denise shot back, turning to Ruth. "How many times are we going to hear about Diana? It's been decades. At some point, you have to move on." Harry's face flushed red. You could see his hands gripping the armrests of his chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His breathing became noticeably heavier. "Excuse me, what did you just say?" "You heard me perfectly well," Denise said, looking directly at him now, with an expression that seemed almost challenging. "Every single interview, every single public appearance, it's always about your mom. Maybe if you focus less on the past and more on actually doing something meaningful with your life, people would take you more seriously. Maybe you'd actually accomplish something instead of just talking about how hard everything has been for you." Nadia jumped in immediately, her voice urgent and pleading. "Denise, stop this right now. This is incredibly disrespectful. You're crossing every line that exists." "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," Denise replied, waving her hand dismissively in the air. "We're all tired of the sob story. You're a grown man now. It's time to act like one instead of constantly playing the victim." Harry stood up abruptly. The movement was so sudden and forceful that his chair scraped loudly against the floor, the sound echoing through the now completely silent studio. The studio went dead quiet. You could hear nothing except the faint hum of the cameras still rolling, capturing every single second of this tension, every expression, every uncomfortable moment. "I came here in good faith," Harry said, his voice shaking with barely controlled anger. You could see him trying to keep himself together, trying to maintain some semblance of composure. "I came here today to talk about helping people, about causes that actually matter, about making a difference in people's lives. But you've turned this into some kind of twisted ambush. This isn't an interview. This is an attack." Denise leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. If you can't handle a few tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews." "Tough questions?" Harry's voice rose. "You just mocked my dead mother on national television. That's not journalism. That's cruelty." Ruth stood up too, trying to defuse the situation. "Harry, I am so sorry. This is not how we conduct ourselves on this show." "Speak for yourself, Ruth," Denise interjected. "I'm not going to sit here and coddle someone just because they have a title. He wants to be treated like everyone else? Well, this is it." The audience began murmuring, some calling out in support of Harry, others looking shocked at what was unfolding. Nadia addressed Denise directly. "This has gone too far. You need to apologize right now." "I'm not apologizing for speaking the truth," Denise said flatly. "If he can't handle it, he can leave." Harry looked at all three women, his expression a mixture of hurt and fury. "You know what? I will leave. I don't need to stand here and be insulted by someone who clearly has no concept of basic human decency." "There he goes, running away," Denise called out as Harry started to walk off the set. "Just like he runs from everything else." Harry stopped in his tracks. He turned around slowly, pointing at Denise. "Running away? I've served my country. I've walked through minefields in Angola. I've sat with wounded veterans who've given everything for people like you. What have you done besides sit on a talk show and tear people down?" The audience erupted in applause. Some people stood up, cheering for Harry. The sound filled the studio, a wave of support that seemed to catch Denise off guard. Denise's face turned red. She sat up straighter, her voice rising to compete with the applause. "How dare you? I've been in this industry for 30 years. 30 years of interviewing people, of asking the questions others are afraid to ask. And you've learned nothing about compassion," Harry fired back, his voice cutting through the noise. 30 years of what exactly? Making people feel small? Tearing them down for sport? Congratulations on that legacy. The audience noise grew louder. Someone shouted, "Leave him alone!" Another voice called out, "Apologize to him." Denise pointed at the audience. "Oh, so now we're going to be dictated to by the audience? And this is a discussion show. We discuss things. We don't just sit here and nod along with everything our guests say." "There's a difference between discussion and attack," Nadia said, her voice shaking with emotion. "What you're doing right now is attacking him. Can't you see that?" "I'm holding him accountable," Denise insisted. "Someone has to." Harry laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Accountable for what? For grieving my mother? For talking about mental health? For trying to help people? What exactly am I being held accountable for?" Denise leaned forward, her eyes locked on Harry. "For using your privilege while pretending you don't have it. For acting like you're just like everyone else when you're not. For making millions off of telling your story, while regular people suffer in silence." "That's enough." Ruth's voice was sharp, commanding. "Denise, I'm asking you to stop right now. This has gone far beyond any reasonable line of questioning." But Denise wasn't backing down. "Why should I stop? Because he's a prince? Because we're supposed to treat him with kid gloves? I thought he wanted to be treated like everyone else." Being treated like everyone else doesn't mean being abused, Harry said, his voice dropping to a quieter but more intense tone. It means being treated with basic respect. Something you clearly don't understand. Nadia stood up from her chair now, too. I can't be part of this. Denise, you need to apologize right now, or I'm walking off this set, too. Then walk, Denise said dismissively. If you can't handle real television, go ahead and walk. The audience gasped again. Some people started booing. The tension in the studio was reaching a breaking point. Ruth tried again to intervene. Please, everyone, let's just take a breath and calm down. But Harry wasn't finished. The dam had broken, and everything he'd been holding back came pouring out. You want to know why I talk about my mom? I'll tell you exactly why. Because she was killed by people like you. People who thought they had the right to say anything, do anything, invade every part of her life. People who treated her like a commodity instead of a human being. Denise opened her mouth to respond, but Harry kept going. And here you are, sitting in your comfortable chair, on your comfortable set, doing the exact same thing, except you're doing it to her son, on television, for ratings. You're doing it to me, and you think that's acceptable because you call it honest conversation. The studio had gone completely silent now, except for Harry's voice. Even the camera operators seemed frozen in place. Do you know what it's like, Harry continued, his voice breaking slightly, to lose your mother at 12 years old? To have that grief broadcasted to the entire world? To have people analyze how you cried at her funeral? To spend your whole life hearing people talk about her, use her, exploit her memory? Denise's expression had shifted. She looked uncomfortable now, but she still tried to maintain her position. I'm not exploiting anyone's memory. I'm asking you questions that people want answered. No, Harry said firmly. You're using my pain for entertainment. There's a difference, and the fact that you can't see that difference is exactly the problem. The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. Even Denise seemed momentarily stunned into silence. Nadia spoke softly. Harry, we don't all feel this way. Please know that. I know, Nadia, Harry said, his voice calmer now, but still firm. But I won't sit here and pretend this is acceptable. I won't normalize this kind of behavior. Denise found her voice again, though it lacked its earlier confidence. You're being incredibly sensitive. No, Harry said, shaking his head. I'm being human. Something you might want to try sometime. He looked at Ruth and Nadia. I'm sorry you had to be part of this. You both asked thoughtful questions, and I appreciated that. But I can't continue this conversation. A producer appeared from the side of the stage, clearly panicking. The audience was still buzzing, some people shouting encouragement to Harry, others calling out criticism toward Denise. Denise stood up now, too, her voice defensive. Fine, leave then. We don't need you here anyway. We've had plenty of royals on this show, and they managed to handle a real conversation. A real conversation? Harry laughed bitterly. Is that what you call this? Attacking someone's grief? Mocking their trauma? If that's your idea of conversation, I feel sorry for everyone who's ever sat in this chair. Ruth placed a hand on Harry's arm gently. Harry, I am truly sorry. This should never have happened. It's not your fault, Ruth, Harry said, his anger visibly subsiding into exhaustion. But I think it's clear I need to go. As he turned to leave, Denise couldn't help herself. Make sure you tell everyone how mean we were to you. I'm sure the press will eat it up. Harry stopped one more time. When he spoke, and his voice was quiet but cutting. You know what the saddest part is? My mom would have forgiven you for this. She would have seen past your bitterness and tried to understand why you feel the need to hurt people. But I'm not her. I don't have to accept cruelty disguised as honesty. With that, he walked off the set. The camera followed him as he disappeared behind the curtain, his security team quickly surrounding him. The audience continued to react. a mix of supportive applause and uncomfortable silence. Back on the panel, Ruth looked directly into the camera. "We're going to take a quick break." But before they could cut away, Denise spoke again. "Oh, come on. He's just trying to play the victim again." Nadia slammed her hand on the desk. "Denise, enough. What is wrong with you? You just drove a guest off our show by insulting his deceased mother. How can you possibly think that's acceptable?" "I was just asking questions," Denise protested. "No," Ruth said firmly. "You were being cruel. There's a difference, and you know it." The feed finally cut to commercial, but the damage was done. In the green room, Harry was removing his microphone, his hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline. His press secretary was on the phone, already dealing with the fallout. A production assistant approached nervously. "Sir, I just want to say that was incredibly brave. What she said was completely out of order." Harry managed a small smile. "Thank you. I just couldn't sit there and take it anymore." Back in the studio, during the commercial break, the panel was in complete disarray. Ruth was speaking intensely with a producer, her face flushed with anger. Nadia sat with her head in her hands, and Denise, despite her defiant exterior, looked rattled. A senior producer approached the desk. "Denise, what were you thinking? We're going to have to issue an apology. This is a PR nightmare." "I don't see why I should apologize for doing my job," Denise said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Your job isn't to traumatize our guests," Ruth snapped. "Your job is to have meaningful conversations, not to score cheap points by attacking someone's grief." Nadia looked at Denise with genuine confusion. "Why did you do that? What did you possibly hope to achieve?" Denise didn't answer. For the first time, she seemed to realize the magnitude of what had just happened. In the audience, people were talking amongst themselves, many expressing shock at what they'd witnessed. One woman near the front called out, "That was disgusting. He didn't deserve that." Another voice added, "She went way too far. Way too far." The production team scrambled to figure out how to handle the rest of the show. They still had 20 minutes of airtime to fill, but their main guest was gone. And the atmosphere was poisonous. When they came back from commercial, Ruth addressed the camera with visible discomfort. "We want to apologize for what just transpired. That exchange should not have happened, and we take full responsibility for the distress it may have caused our guest and our viewers." Denise sat silently, her arms still crossed, refusing to look at the camera. Nadia added, "Prince Harry came here today to discuss important work regarding mental health and veteran support. Instead, he was subjected to personal attacks that were completely inappropriate. We hope he knows that not everyone on this panel shares those views." The rest of the show limped along awkwardly. They tried to transition to other topics, but the energy was gone. The audience remained subdued, and even the usually lively discussion segments felt flat and forced. Behind the scenes, Harry's team was already in damage control mode, but Harry himself seemed strangely calm. "I said what I needed to say," he told his press secretary. "I'm not going to apologize for defending my mother's memory." His security detail escorted him out through a back entrance, away from any cameras or reporters who might be gathering. As he climbed into his car, he took a deep breath, processing everything that had just happened. Meanwhile, social media was already exploding with reactions. The clips of the confrontation were being shared thousands of times. The hashtag defending Harry was trending within minutes. People were posting messages of support, condemning Denise's behavior, and praising Harry for standing up for himself. Back at the studio, as the show finally ended, the panel dispersed quickly. Ruth immediately went to speak with producers about formal apologies and next steps. Nadia left without speaking to Denise, and Denise herself sat alone at the desk for a moment, and the weight of what she'd done beginning to sink in. A younger producer approached her cautiously. "Denise, the network wants to speak with you." She nodded slowly, standing up and gathering her things. As she walked off the set, past crew members who wouldn't meet her eyes, the reality of the situation became clear. She had pushed too far, said too much, and hurt someone who came in good faith. The audience filed out, still discussing what they'd witnessed. Some were angry, some were sad. All were stunned. This was supposed to be a feel-good interview about charity and positive change. Instead, it had turned into one of the most uncomfortable moments in the show's history. In his car, Harry stared out the window at the London streets passing by. His phone was buzzing constantly, with messages of support from friends and family. But he didn't reach for it. He just sat quietly, replaying the confrontation in his mind. He thought about his mother, about how she had endured so much worse during her life, how she had been hounded and criticized and torn apart by media that claimed to love her. And now, years after her death, people still thought it was acceptable to use her as a weapon against her children. The security officer in the front seat glanced back. "You all right, sir?" Harry nodded. "Yeah, I'm all right. I just wish people understood that behind all the titles and the public life, we're still human beings. We still feel pain. We still grieve. What you did back there took real courage," the officer said, standing up like that. "It didn't feel like courage," Harry admitted. "It felt like survival. Like if I didn't speak up, I'd be betraying everything she taught me about standing up for what's right." Back at the studio, Ruth was on the phone with network executives, explaining the situation and discussing how to handle the public response. "I understand, but I want to be clear that what happened today does not reflect the values of this show or this panel. Denise went rogue, and she needs to be held accountable." Nadia sat in her dressing room, still processing the shock of it all. She had worked with Denise for years, had seen her be tough and direct with guests before, but never like this. Never so personal, so cruel. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. It was one of the show's researchers. "Nadia, are you okay?" And that was intense. "I don't think any of us are okay right now," Nadia replied. "How could she say those things? How could she think that was appropriate?" The researcher shook her head. "I don't know. I've never seen anything like it." Meanwhile, Denise was in a meeting with network representatives, and it was not going well. They were making it clear that her actions had put the show, the network, and her own career in jeopardy. The public backlash was already fierce and growing by the minute. "I was just trying to ask real questions," Denise tried to explain. "I was trying to have an honest conversation." "There's a difference between honest and hurtful," one executive said sternly. "You crossed a line that should never be crossed. You attacked a guest's dead mother on live television. How did you think that would be acceptable?" Denise had no good answer. In the heat of the moment, fueled by her own ego and desire to seem tough, she had said things that couldn't be unsaid. And now she was facing the consequences. As the meeting continued, Harry arrived back at his residence. He removed his jacket, loosened his tie, and sat down heavily on the sofa. The events of the day played over and over in his mind. The initial pleasant conversation, the sudden shift in tone, Denise's shocking comments, his decision to stand up and fight back. His press secretary entered the room. "Harry, I need to brief you on the response. It's overwhelming, but it's mostly supportive. People are on your side." "I don't care about sides," Harry said quietly. "I just want people to understand that you can't treat people like that. You can't use someone's grief as entertainment." "And I think you made that very clear today," his press secretary said. "What you said, how you handled yourself, it resonated with people. They saw someone standing up against bullying, against cruelty disguised as conversation." Harry looked up. "Do you think I overreacted?" "Absolutely not," came the firm reply. "You reacted like any person would when they're being attacked. You defended yourself, and you defended your mother's memory. There's nothing wrong with that." As evening approached, the full scope of the incident became clear. News outlets were covering it extensively. Think pieces were being written about boundaries in interviews, about respect for grief, about the power dynamics between hosts and guests. The Loose Women team was in crisis mode, trying to contain the damage and figure out how to move forward. Ruth and Nadia both released personal statements expressing their dismay at what had occurred and offering their sincere apologies to Harry. They made it clear that Denise's views did not represent theirs, and that they were deeply troubled by the way the interview had unfolded. Denise, for her part, remained silent for now, but though the pressure on her to issue an apology was mounting with every passing hour. In quiet moments throughout the evening, Harry reflected on why he had reacted so strongly. It wasn't just about defending himself or his mother. It was about setting a boundary. It was about saying that some things are not acceptable, no matter who you are or what platform you have. He thought about all the people struggling with grief, with loss, with trauma, who might have been watching. He hoped they saw that it was okay to stand up for yourself, that you didn't have to accept cruelty just because someone claimed they were being honest or asking tough questions. His phone rang. It was his brother. They talked for a while about what had happened, about the importance of protecting their mother's legacy, about the ongoing challenges of living life in the public eye while trying to maintain basic human dignity. After the call ended, Harry sat in the growing darkness of his living room, processing everything. The confrontation had been ugly and painful, but necessary. He had drawn a line in the sand, and he didn't regret it. At the television studio, the lights were being turned off for the night. The set where the confrontation had occurred just hours earlier sat empty and quiet. But the impact of what had happened there would echo for a long time to come. The production team would spend days analyzing what went wrong, and how to prevent it from happening again, and how to rebuild the trust that had been damaged. Some would argue about editorial oversight, about the responsibility of hosts to maintain professional boundaries, about the need for better preparation and sensitivity training. But beneath all the professional analysis and corporate damage control, there was a simpler truth. Someone had been hurt unnecessarily, and that hurt had been broadcast for entertainment. And someone else had said, "Enough is enough." As the night grew later, Harry finally felt some of the tension leaving his body. He had done what he felt was right. He had spoken his truth. He had honored his mother's memory by refusing to let it be weaponized against him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new fallout from the incident. But tonight, he could rest, knowing that he had stood up for himself and for basic human decency. The studio building stood dark and silent in the night, but the conversation it had sparked was just beginning. People across the country and around the world were talking about what they had witnessed, about respect and boundaries, about how we treat each other, especially when cameras are rolling and ratings are at stake. And in the center of it all was a simple question. When does honest conversation cross the line into cruelty? Harry had answered that question clearly today. Denise had answered it too, though not in the way she had intended. The show would go on. The network would survive. The panel would be reshuffled and restructured. But the moment when a guest stood up and walked out, refusing to accept disrespect, would be remembered as a turning point. It was a reminder that behind every public figure, every royal title, every celebrity persona, there is a human being with feelings, with pain, with limits to what they will tolerate. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply say no. No to cruelty. No to exploitation. No to the idea that everything is fair game in the pursuit of entertainment. Harry had said no today, loudly, clearly, and the world had been watching.